Good afternoon. Today we will study about the pronoun that, which is applied as a subordinating conjunction. We've studied about the pronoun that as one of the indicating pronouns, but we are also able to apply the pronoun that as a subordinating conjunction to link the subordinate clause to the main clause. As the other related pronouns are, the pronoun that indicate the same subject or object of the precedent in the main clause. And the difference between the other pronouns and the pronoun that is the range of the precedent. The speaker indicates a sort of the subject or object by the pronoun who or which. We also studied about the defining way or the non-defining way to use the pronoun which or who as the related pronoun. Compared to these pronouns, the pronoun that is applied to indicate the whole precedent in the main clause. We will study about that in this class. Let's read the explanation first. The speaker links the subordinate clause that has the trait as an adjective to the main clause with the pronoun that. From the perspective of the speaker, the subordinate clause conveys the additional description about the precedent to the listeners, which is extended from the statement of the main clause. The speaker can describe about the precedent in the main clause by the subordinate clause. The reason why the speaker states the subordinate clause is to give the detailed information for the listeners. The indicated pronoun that is a principle to link the subordinate clause to the main clause from the perspective to substitute the fact that the subordinate clause deals with the experience, condition, or action about the precedent, which is little relevant to the original intention of the speaker to state the sentence into the recognition of distance revealed by the indicated pronoun that. This is the relation between the indicated pronoun that as the origin of the subordinating conjunction that and the subordinating conjunction that. When we apply the pronoun that as the indicated pronoun, we try to indicate an object that is far from the speaker and the only subject or object. And yeah, that's the application of the indicated pronoun that. The pronoun that link the subordinate clause that has the trait as an adjective to the main clause indicate every subject or object that is a person, not a person or plural subject or object, as the precedent of the main clause. Any subject or object can be indicated by the pronoun that. The pronoun that applied as a subordinating conjunction does not indicate the precedent selectively because the pronoun that is able to set every indication stated ahead of the pronoun that in the main clause. The speaker applies the pronoun that to indicate every indication stated ahead of the pronoun that in the main clause. In which way? In the defining way. Because of the main characteristic, main feature of the pronoun that to indicate that is able to indicate every precedent in the main clause. The speaker only able to use the pronoun that in the defining way. The speaker does not apply comma with the pronoun that as a subordinating conjunction. There are 3 examples to study how the speaker applies the pronoun that as the subordinating conjunction. Let's study about 3 examples together. The bread that is one of my breakfast menus tastes delicious. In this sentence, before we study about the 3 examples, let's make it clear that the precedent of the pronoun that as the subordinating conjunction can be every indication in the main clause ahead of the pronoun that. So we can find that the precedent of the first example is the phrase of the general noun. The phrase of the material noun, the bread. And the pronoun that indicates the phrase of the material noun, the bread, as well in the subordinate clause. The subordinate clause started from the pronoun that and until this part, menus. The subordinate clause is completely stated, and we can find that the verb of the main clause to describe the precedent, and the subordinate clause is this intransitive verb taste. And let's look into how the pronoun that is applied in the subordinate clause. In the subordinate clause, we can find that the pronoun that is the subject described by the be verb is. Yeah, I think that's enough. Okay, let's go to the second example. I put some grains that come from a basket. This sentence. Let's study about this sentence. We can find that the precedent of the second example is this: some grains. And these precedents are indicated by the pronoun that as the subordinating conjunction, and we find that the subordinate clause starts from the pronoun that come from a basket. So we find that the form of the intransitive verb come is in the original form. This means that the number of the subject is plural, and this is true because that indicates the object, some grains in the main clause. Let's look into the subordinate clause. As we find that the intransitive verb come describes the related pronoun, the subordinating conjunction that. So we find that the subordinating conjunction that as the related pronoun is the subject in the subordinate clause. Okay, let's go to the third example. The house becomes a famous place that has some grains of rice. In this third example, we find that the precedent is the phrase of the general noun of famous place. And the pronoun that indicates the precedent of famous place, whose number is 1, singular, and the subordinate clause starts from the pronoun that has some grains of rice. Let's let's analyze the subordinate clause. The subject described by the transitive verb has is the pronoun that, and the form of the transitive verb has is for the subject whose number is singular and that does not participate in the conversation with the speaker and the listeners. This is obvious because that the pronoun that indicates the precedent in the main clause of famous plays. Okay, let's study the examples one by one. The first example was this: the bread that is one of my breakfast menus tastes delicious. And we can find the reason why the form of this intransitive verb taste is in the form for the subject whose number is singular and that does not participate in the conversation with the speaker and the listeners. The subject that is described by the intransitive verb taste is the bread, basically, the precedent. So we can find that the subject verb agreement is made even though the subject and the verb stated fall apart in the sentence. The speaker indicates the subject of the intransitive verb in the main clause with the precedent, the bread, to indicate a subject, not a person. And the subordinate clause that is one of my breakfast menus to describe the condition of the precedent, the bread. The pronoun that indicates the same subject as the precedent, the bread, indicates the subject of the object verb is in the subordinate clause. There is an important conference that is about a comparison. This comparison is about the sentences whose subordinate clause has the trait as a pronoun or an adjective linked by the pronoun that. Even though the subordinate clauses are linked by the pronoun that in common, they can have the different trait in each sentence. The first trait that the subordinate clause can have is that the first trait is that the subordinate clause as a pronoun. And the second trait that a subordinate clause can have is as an adjective. We are studying about the subordinate clause that has the trait as an adjective for the precedent in the main clause, but we've studied about the subordinate clause that functions as a pronoun in a sentence. Like, I think that this umbrella is awesome. In this sentence, the speaker states the object of the verb, the transitive verb think in the main clause, as the pronoun that, and the speaker states a subordinate clause after the pronoun. This umbrella is awesome. The speaker indicates the same object as the speaker considers that the pronoun that and the subordinate clause, this umbrella is awesome, are the same. So the speaker can abbreviate the pronoun that because the subordinate clause, this umbrella is awesome, is relatively detailed. It gives us the detailed information. And unlike this application of the pronoun for the subordinate clause, as the indication. The speaker applies the subordinate clause to describe the precedent in the main clause when the subordinate clause has the trait as an adjective. Just like this sentence, this whole subordinate clause has the trait as an adjective to describe the bread. We get to know what the bread is like by the subordinate clause. Okay, let's study about this difference by the conferences. The first conference is this: that you drink water is good. The speaker applies the subordinate clause that you drink water is as the subject of the main clause, and the verb of the main clause is the be verb is. So we can see that the subject is very long in this sentence. The speaker applies the pronoun that to indicate the subordinate clause you drink water and to link the subordinate clause to the main clause. And the second conference is this: the water that you drink is good. In this sentence, the speaker applies the subordinate clause to describe the precedent in the main clause, the water. And the be verb describes the precedent of the main clause, the water, described by the subordinate clause. And let's read the explanation. The speaker applies the pronoun that as a subordinating conjunction with the fact that the pronoun that indicates the same subject as the phrase of the noun, the water, in the main clause. The speaker indicates the subject of the be verb is with the precedent, the water, and the subordinate clause that you drink to describe the precedent, the water, with the action indicated by the definition of the transitive verb drink. Okay, the biggest difference between the two applications is that the subordinate clause as an adjective is stated with the precedent, but the subordinate clause applied as an indication is applied without the precedent in the main clause. Okay, we will study about the second example in the next class. Thank you for watching.